We are dedicated by Shalom Fogel, Lila Nishmas, Yaakov Zeb ben Yudaya, Rivka bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam bas Gad, Yosef ben Tzion ben Yaakov Zev, Lefu Shalema for Moshe Arya ben Miriam, for a great shidduch for Chaya Tzivya bas Shoshana Gittel. We also learn, sponsored by Baruch Ian, Lila Nishmas, Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther bas Yona, Avram ben Shmuel HaKayin, Ufur Shalema for Liba bas Anya. We learn for a great shidduch for Batya bas Sarah. We learn for Ufur Shalema for Yosh Shmuel ben Miriam, and for a healthy mommy, healthy baby for Ariel and Lior bas Elza Rivka.
Ufur Shalema Mordechai Tzvi ben Roshana.
Mordechai Tzvi ben Roshana.
David Menachos
Alevi. Ben Rachel. Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel. Okay, so Yochai ben Ruchama. So we are holding on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis by Rebbe Chelbai. So Amar Rebbe Chelbai, Chazina Leila Rav Huna, we roll the mezuzah to put it inside. So we could roll it from Shema to Echad, or from Echad to Shema. So Chazina Leila Rav Huna, de Korach La Me Echad Klapei Shema. He would roll it from the word Echad toward Shema, V'ose Parshi Osav Sesumais. And he would make the two parshas of Shema B'Yim Shemaya closed, which means that he would finish the first parsha of Uvisharecha on one line, leave a space, and start B'Yim Shemaya on the same line a little bit away. So Meisvei, Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Meir, Hayakoisvei al duchsustus. Now here I have to give you a definition of what's duchsustus. You see, the hide of an animal, which is called gevil, is peeled in half. The outer half is called klaf. That's klaf from the Lashon klipa, the peel. The inner one is duchsustus. Now, when writing on the klaf, they write on the side that's closer to the animal. Writing on the duchsustus, they write on the side that's closer to the outside. So he says, Rameir Yakoisva al duchsustus, he would write it on this inner parchment, Kimin Daf, and it would be a long column, not short and wide like tefillin. There would be a margin on top and a margin on the bottom. And he made the parshas open. That means Uvisharecha finished on one line and Vayim Shemaya started on the next line. Amarti Lai, I said to him, Rebbe Matam, why do you make the parshas psuchos? Amali, he said to me, Hayil ve'ein smuchos min ha-Torah. Since in the Torah, that Shema and Vayim Shemaya are not next to each other. V'amar Rav Chananel Amar Rav halacha k'Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So it seems to be that the halacha is that it's supposed to be psuchos and not stumos. Ma'alav psuchos, doesn't it mean that the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, that it should be open, contrary to what we said on the bottom of Amud Beis? Loi arevach, it means that you should leave room on the top and on the bottom. Now, v'kama revach, how much room? By the Sefer Torah, we gave the amount in Tzvachim. How much room? Amar Rav Menachos bar Yaakov v'imri lo Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yaakov. Either Rav Menachos bar Yaakov said, and others say Rav Shmuel bar Yaakov said, Kimaloi atba de sifrei. there should be room for the clamps, the clips of the cipher. You see, the cipher, if you want to write, you don't want the parchment to roll, to furl, so they put a clamp on the top and on the bottom so that it shouldn't move. So it should be room for that clip to fit. Amalei Abayel Rav Yosef, Ba'atlei Tizbra D'chi Amar Rav Revach. You don't think that Rav said the halacha on the room, not on psuchos? Because Rav Islay Minhaga, Rav always went according to the local custom. There's a famous saying, Aminig Brecht Adin. Rav would go according to local custom. And we all are noig in the mezuzah to start the Vahayim Shemaya on the same line. How do we know that Rav goes according to the minig? Now you have to know, in the procedure of chalitza, where if Rahman al-Itzlan, a man dies and leaves his wife childless, so she either does yibum or chalitza with the brother. Now in the chalitza procedure, in the chalitza ceremony, the shoe is removed. Now the minig was to use a sandal, a hard shoe, and not a minnow, not a soft leather shoe. So the Gemara tells us, the Amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav, Im Yava Eliyahu v'Yomer Chaitzim b'minel, that you could also use a minel, Shaimin like, we would listen to him. But if Eliyahu would come and say, Ein Chaitzim b'sandal, that you can't do chalitza with this hard shoe, Ein Shaimin like, because that's already been the minig throughout the generations. Shekvar Nagu Am b'sandal. Now there's a little bit of a slightly different version. Rav Yosef Amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav, Im Yavai Eliyahu v'Yomer Ein Chaitzim b'minel, that you're not allowed to do chalitza with a minel, Shaimin like. Because anyway, we didn't do it. Ein Chaitzim b'sandal, but if he says not to do it, Ein Shaimin like, Shekvar Nagu Am b'sandal. So you see how powerful a minig is, that even if Eliyahu would come and say it, we wouldn't go against the local minig. You know, they say that minig is the same letters as Gehenim, because when one needlessly does not follow a minig, then it could go to Gehenim. However, you have to know that this should not be taken out of context. When something is a minig, it is trumped by certain things. For example, it's trumped by Shalom Bayis. Rabbi Frand says a very important rule. He said there's almost no chumrah that is worth risking your Shalom Bayis for. Rabbi Frand, there's a reason why Rabbi Frand speaks by every Siyam Hashas to 100,000 people. Because he's a voice of common sense. You have to know when something interferes with Shalom Bayis, then we have to know that sometimes a chumrah doesn't have its place. Now, what's the difference between the two versions? If Eliyahu would say we should use a minel, or if Eliyahu would say don't use a minel. So the Gemara says the difference is minel l'chatchila kibeinai. The one that says if Eliyahu would come and say use a minel, that means until now they didn't use l'chatchila, a soft leather shoe for chalitza. If he said don't use a minel, that means that until now they did. So we see Rebbe goes, and we see Rav goes according to the local custom. The local custom is to do the mezuzah stumais. So when he says the halacha above, he couldn't be going on psuchais, he's going on revach, leaving space on top and bottom. Elav shmamina, revach shmamina. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, mitzvah la'asais and stumais. It's a mitzvah to make them closed. In other words, to start Vayim Shemaya on the same line after a brief space. V'iyavdinu psuchais, but if you make it open, starting on the next line, shaperdami. And when Reb Shimon Elazar says psuchais, he didn't mean to rule out stumais. Or my psuchais, the Kamar Reb Shimon Elazar, he meant af psuchais. You could even do it psuchais, but the mitzvah is to do it stumais. So the Gemara says, Lema Messiah, let's adduce a proof to this. This is an interesting thing. You know, I had a Sefer Torah, which 35 years ago I bought in memory of my shver. And Baruch Hashem, we used it for a good 33 years. But I bought it already, a very old Sefer Torah. We used it in Aguda in Staten Island many years. But the letters started to fade. And we couldn't use it anymore. That's called the Sefer Torah Shabbalah. The Sefer Torah gets worn out. Right now, the Sefer Torah has a home in the Belzer Shul in Lakewood, where they dance with it on Simchas Torah. But, so the Gemara tells us that Kayaytze by Sefer Torah Shabbalah, if you have a Sefer Torah that wore out, or a tefillin Shabbalah, or a tefillin that wore out, Ein oisem mezuzah. You can't make from it a mezuzah. You can't take the parsha of Shema, the parsha of Vayim Shemaya, and use it as a mezuzah. Why? Because a Sefer Torah and tefillin have more kedusha than mezuzah. Lefi she'ein moridin kedusha chamura lekedusha kala. We can't demote it from a higher kedusha like a Sefer Torah or tefillin to the lesser kedusha of a mezuzah. But an implication is ha-morid in eisen. But if you would be allowed to, you could do it. But amai, hachas stumais in the Sefer Torah, the parsha of Vayim Shemaya and Shema is stuma, v'hacha psuchais. And here, if you hold that it has to be open, like the pashtus of Shimon Elazar, you wouldn't be able to use it. Says the Gemara, Dilma lahashlim. No, maybe what it means is that if you're missing a line, you could cut out the line from the Sefer Torah and sew it into the mezuzah. Says the Gemara, but I don't understand. How could you even possibly think that you could use a Sefer Torah for a mezuzah? We know that mezuzah needs a special property called sirtut. That means that you have to score it with like an embedded line on the bottom of each line, underneath each line. Says the Gemara, Hamarid and Eisen, Vatanya Aloch L'Moshe Misinai, Tefillin ala klaf. Tefillin should be written on klaf, that's the outer layer of the gevil, of the parchment. Umezuzah ala duchsustas, the mezuzah is on the inner part. When you write the tefillin on the klaf b'mekoim basar, that's the side of the klaf that's towards the animal. And duchsustas, and when you write it on the duchsustas, you write it on the outer part b'mekoim seir, towards the outside, towards the hair. So, but you see that how could it be used from tefillin to mezuzah? Tefillin is written on klaf, and mezuzah is on duchsustas. So how could how could you use one from the other? Says the Gemara, no. That which it says is only the mitzvah, that it's preferred. I vatanya shina puzzle. If you change it, it's puzzle. Says the Gemara, that's b'tfilin. That if you change the tefillin and instead of doing it on the klaf, you do it on the duchsustas, it's puzzle. But not by mezuzah. Vatanya shina bein bezeh puzzle. If you deviate bein bezeh puzzle, so it seems to imply that it's puzzle even if you deviate and you do the mezuzah on klaf. Says the Gemara, no. Aidi va'aidi b'tefillin. Both are talking about tefillin. And it's saying, it's puzzle if you write the tefillin on the klaf, but instead of writing it on the inner part, towards the body of the animal, you write it on the outer part. And if you write it on duchsustas, which is in the place of the basar, then that would not be good either, because you have to write it under the sustas, the inner part of the gvil, towards the outside part. The ibayis ema, there's actually machlokes tanoim. If you switch and you do mezuzah with klaf and tefillin with duchsustas, ibayis ema shina bezeh tanoyi. It's machlokes tanoim. The Tanya shina bezeh puzzle. Rabbi Acha machshir, and Rabbi Acha says it's okay. Mishum Rabbi Choy Rabbi Chanina. The Imrei law that Rabbi Acha said it's kosher. Mishmei de Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Chanina. So there is an opinion that you could write the mezuzah on klaf, and then it would be nageya. Could you take from tefillin to the mezuzah? So now the Gemara asks the other question, and let me welcome in. We have such a beautiful crowd over here. We welcome in Dr. Guy, and Ben Sion Cohn, and Yaakov Warman, and Saba, Menachem Yemansky, Yisrael Fisher, Irving Fishbaum, Mel Zachter, Ruvain Shanit. We welcome in Eddie Chazan, Chaim Kramer, Mo Kushner, Marshall Castle, Shalom Fogel, Berish Gesserman, Ruvain Palak, Yitz, Shelley, Michal, Mark, Michal Avram, Nachman Chapler, Barry Cement, Gedalia Engel, Yitzi Muller, Gabriel Epstein, Naftali Jablin, Moshe Lehman, Chaim Lerner, Shimon Klein, Danny Vogel, Stephen Holtzman, Eli Yaffe, Yehuda Solomon, very great to have you, A. Barbach, Daniel Rosenberg, David Helfgott. The Gemara says, how could we have a havamina to use from a Torah and tefillin from mezuzah? Hamarid and Eisen, if it wouldn't be a problem of demoting its kedusha, you would be able to use it. But v'habai sirtut, the mezuzah needs the scoring under each line. The Amarav Minyami Bar Chilkiya, Amarav Chama Bar Gurya, Amarav, Kol mezuzah she'ena mesurtetes psula. Mezuzah that's not scored is puzzle. V'Rav Minyamin Bar Chilkiya Didei Amar, Sirtut shel mezuzah is halacha Moshe Sinai. So how could you use one from the other? Again, the Gemara says this is actually a machlokes tanoim. Tanoihi, the Tanya, Rabbi Yirmiyah Aimer Mishum Rabbeinu, Tefillin u'mezuzahs nichtavai shaloi min aksav. This is an interesting thing. Usually, when we write a Sefer Torah, we have to have another Sefer Torah or Chumash and write one from the other. But the Tefillin and mezuzahs you could write by heart. Ve'ein tzrichin sirtut. And it doesn't need to be scored. So you see, there is an opinion, it doesn't need to be scored. V'hilchasa, but what's the halacha? V'hilchasa, the halacha is tefillin loy ba yisirtut. You don't need to score the tefillin. Mezuzah ba yisirtut. That's actually halacha l'maisim yisinai. V'aidi nichtava shalom neksav. You don't have to write it from a chumash. My taima migris grisen, because the Seifrim that write tefillin and mezuzahs They write many, 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 many of them, and therefore they're very fluent in it. Amar Rabbi Chelboi, Anoch hazitei l'Rav Huna, I saw Rav Huna Davi Yosef Apurye the Sefer Torah alei. He wanted to sit on a bed that has a Sefer Torah. So, but he wouldn't sit on the bed if the Sefer Torah was there. So the kaf lekada a'ara, he turned over a barrel, a jug, and la'anach alei Sefer Torah, and first put the Sefer Torah on it, v'hada yosef b'mita, and then he put it on the bed. Today, we're makbid even with svarim, that we don't lie down on a sefer that on a bed that has svarim on it, right? We either get something and we elevate it so we're not laying on it, or we put it on a chair. This is the old problem of shuls that have benches, and people put the chamashim and the sidarim down on the bench. That's why, of course, the later development, they made in front of the bench, they made places to keep the sidurim and the chamashim so that it shouldn't be on the bench, because you don't want to sit on the bench that has a svarim on it. Says the Gemara, Kosovar, he holds also leishav al gabi mita. You can't sit on a bed shesefer Torah munach aleha, that has a sefer Torah on it. Upliga de Rabba Babachana, but this is in opposition to Rabba Babachana. The Amar Rabba Babachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan, muter leishav al gabi mita shesefer Torah munach aleha. You're allowed to sit on a bed that has a Sefer Torah on it. What about the Maisa with Rebbe Eliezer? V'im lachshach adam loimer Maisa b'Rebbe Eliezer she'yoshev al amita, he was sitting on a bed. V'niska she'Sefer Torah munach aleh, and he remembered that was a Sefer Torah on it. V'nishmat v'yoshev al gabe karka, and he slipped off and sat on the ground. And his face that he sat on the bed with the Sefer Torah, it was like he was bitten by a snake. By the way, we should pause a moment and reflect on that. You know, when somebody does something wrong, they say, oops, I didn't realize. And then some people, they do something wrong, they really, really feel bad about it. And that's what we ask Hashem when we bench Reish Chodesh, Chaim shel yiras chet, a life of fear of sin. He didn't notice it, but he realized he sat and he didn't give the proper honor to a Sefer Torah. You saw on him as if he was bitten by a snake. Somebody says something to his wife and hurts her. He didn't think he would hurt her. He didn't realize. You have to know, you have to really feel bad. It's one of the great mission statements of a human being, of a man, is what it says that Rus told Nami, that Nami told Rus and Arpa, I wish you mitzena isha menucha beis isha, that each of you women should find contentment in the house of your husband. It's a job of a good husband that his wife should be content at home. I remember somebody once complained to me that his wife was always running out of the house. Going to this Chinese auction, going to here, going to there. And I said to him, do you think that your house is a place of contentment? Or does she just want to get out of there? And every husband has to ask themselves that question. A woman has to ask herself that question too. If anything, a woman really has to ask herself that question, because her major mission statement is to be an Ezer Kenegdoi. A man's, although it is a mission statement of a man, but a man's major mission statement is to be a man of Torah. But it is, Rav Chaim Vital said, how could you tell the quality of a person? See how they treat their wife. That's the quality of the person. Not how they act in shul, not the things that they do for their neighbors. How do they act with their wife? That's the true caliber of a person. Sometimes it's not easy. But that's what I said in the Chumash here. The declaration of Na'aseh v'Nishma is that we know that whatever Hashem gives us, we could do even if we didn't hear it. Because He wouldn't give it to us if we can't do it. Sometimes I look at people and I say, if I would be in their shoes, I wouldn't be able to handle it. And the answer is that's why Hashem didn't give it to me. Because I wouldn't be able to handle it. They say that one of the reasons why Sarah Imenu died with the news of the Akedah is because the Akedah wasn't her challenge. But anyway, it seems to be that, at least it's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar, that you're not allowed to sit, they are not allowed to sit on a bed that has a Sefer Torah. However, the Gemara changes it. Hasam Sefer Torah al gabe karka. What actually happened was he was sitting in the bed, and he realized that the Sefer Torah was on the ground, and in shock he slipped off the bed to pick it up, and seeing that bizayon of the Sefer Torah made him feel like he was being bitten by a snake. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel, Kasva Igeres. If the mezuzah was written like a letter, not scored, and not with the care of putting in the extra letters and leaving out the missing letters, like for example, the limadatem oisam. Oisam is defective; it doesn't have a vav. It's a famous word from the Chofetz Chaim. You want to teach them, v'limadatem atem. If you learn, that's the best way to teach your children to learn. So, but anyway, it's psula. My timer, asya ksiva mesefer. It says by a get v'kosva sefer creases, and there we know it has to be very exact. So here it has to be very exact. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel Tala b'makel. If you hung the mezuzah on a stick, there was a stick sticking out of the doorpost, and you hung it on that stick like a hook. You hung it on a hook. Psula, that's possible. Why? My time, a bisharecha ba'inan. It has to be in your gate. It has to be on the door. There are some people, I think Rav Chaim Mintz doesn't like the mezuzahs that are, there's fancy mezuzahs that have a back and then two things sticking out and a tube, and the mezuzah goes on the tube. But the mezuzah is not on the door. It's away from that post. So most people use it. They feel it's one piece. But he doesn't even like that. But you can't put it on a rod. It has to be in the gate. Tanya nami hachi, tla b'mako. If you hung it on this stick, or shenicha achar adel, so you put it behind the door, sakana, it's a danger to live in that house because it's like there's no mezuzah. Mezuzah makes the house safe. Says Shin Daled Yid, Shem Yisrael. Ve'ein ba mitzvah, and you don't fulfill the mitzvah. And the Gemara finishes off the shall base munabaz hamelech in the houses of munabaz. Now we know a mezuzah is not chayiv if you're not there for 30 days. So Hayaisim b'pundikois came when he made stops for a night or two, royal stops. He would put the mezuzah on the rod because there's no mitzvah, but he would do that zeichel mezuzah, that he shouldn't forget the obligation of the mezuzah. Okay, so now we're going to do the segment called for the Shabbos table.